of advisory firm Africa at Work. Diana, good afternoon, good evening to you. Not a good day, not a good Africa day for MTN or Nigeria.
It's unfortunate that all of these problems are almost coming to a bit of a head in Nigeria on this particular day. This situation has been brewing for a while, but it seems to have, it's just getting worse, obviously, as the existing supplies dry up and people are unable to source new supplies because of the stranglehold that the fuel importers have on that economy.
The new president, Mr. Buhari, about to take the reins from Goodluck Jonathan, big oil companies saying they haven't been paid. I suppose that change of government creating a bit of stress as well.
Well, one of the issues the new president has to face is what he's going to do about these fuel subsidies, because they're costing the government a huge amount, billions of dollars a year. And this is a government that no longer has that kind of money, given the low oil prices. So this is a very big hot potato for the new president to deal with, literally the second he steps into power. And of course, it doesn't look good for him to have all these presidents flying in from around the world for his inauguration, only to find themselves either unable to do so or stuck at the airport, although I'm sure a plan will be made.
Well, it is a tough situation, and like you say, the sustainability of that subsidization being questioned. Now that the elections are done with, do you think the government will abolish those subsidies, and what does it mean for the economy of Nigeria and the political situation?
It's actually a long-term plan. The government needs to do it. The government of President Jonathan tried it a few years ago. There was an enormous backlash, and he backed off and only partially implemented the pullback. And there's no provision made in the current budget by his government for the incoming government for fuel subsidies, and they are considerable amounts. So it's going to be very tricky for this president to know, well, it'll be interesting to see how he handles this. But it's certainly not the best situation for him on coming to power, is immediately having to deal with an issue that could push many in the electorate against him, because it will mean quite a sharp rise in inflation and the price of fuel obviously driving that sort of thing across the board. So it'll be politically unpopular. He has a lot of goodwill at the moment, so it'll be interesting to see how he handles it. Perhaps he'll just push back a little bit more on this and take some more of the subsidy away. It's unlikely he'll take the whole subsidy away, but at the moment the government's back is against the wall.
Diana, is this exposing a flaw in the structure of the Nigerian economy? We have these firms saying that they haven't been paid by the government. On Friday, I understand there were protests at oil fields in Nigeria. The protesters saying all our wealth is leaving the country. Is there a major lesson here that Nigeria hasn't done what our government is talking about a lot, and that's beneficiating its own commodities, building those refineries and things like that?
Nigeria has several refineries. The problem is that they have not been maintained, and so they've been corroded. So therefore, they only it's about 30% of the fuel that Nigeria requires, which means a massive 70% is actually imported. So that is the problem. It's actually been corruption over the years, a lack of maintenance, neglect, and so on. And now there are refineries, people talking about investing in refineries, but it's a long-term plan. It's not going to happen overnight.
Final question for you, Diana. You're in Nigeria, the biggest country on the biggest economy on the continent right now. You're in the Ivory Coast. We've been looking at Nigeria. Just start there, maybe, and tell us about your outlook for Africa. We're going to be looking at some of the predictions around growth rates in a short while. But what do you think is crucial to watch for in the next year or so?
Well, I'm at the African Development Bank annual meetings, and we've already been quite a lot of discussion about financial inclusion, because, we've got growing poverty at the same time as growth rates are rising, which implies a very large gap in the middle that needs to be addressed in some way. And I think that is probably the issue for the future. The high growth rates on their own are certainly not enough to pull Africa up. And as we've seen, many of the fastest growing countries are coming off an extremely low base and off extremely high poverty.
All right, thank you so much. Diana Games from Africa at Work, talking to us from the Ivory Coast. Well, Africa Day is a time to celebrate how far we've come as a continent. Once the forgotten continent, Africa has been able to boast about some of those fantastic growth rates in recent years.